Most people spend their entire working life chasing a retirement number they never stop to question. They hear 1 million, 2 million, maybe even more, and they start treating those numbers like the price of admission. If they do not hit them, they assume retirement will feel stressful, limited, or impossible. Most retirees are not actually living on the giant number people imagine. In fact, many retire on far less than the cultural script suggests, and the reason it works has almost nothing to do with winning some savings contest. In this video, we're going to break down what most people really retire on, why the answer is lower than many viewers expect, and the one factor that can make that same retirement income feel either comfortable or terrifying. If you want money videos that replace guesswork with clarity, hit like and subscribe. Section 1. The retirement number most people imagine. Most people grow up with a very simple picture of retirement. You work for decades, you save as much as you can, and at some point you're supposed to arrive at a giant round number that means you're safe. For a lot of people, that number is 1 million. For others, it's 2 million. But whatever the number is, it gets treated like a rule instead of an estimate. And that belief sticks for understandable reasons. People are scared of running out of money. Inflation makes everything feel more expensive every year. Headlines keep reminding you that healthcare costs are rising and life is getting pricier. Then you hear round numbers repeated over and over, by friends, by media, by retirement calculators, until they start sounding like the minimum required to survive. So the problem is not that people are foolish for thinking this way. The problem is that they're starting with the wrong question. They're asking, how big does my pile of money need to be? Before they ask, what kind of life is this money supposed to support? And that one mistake is what causes so much confusion about what retirement actually costs. Section 2. The better question is not how much saved. The better question is not how much do I need saved? It's how much income does my life actually need once work stops? That sounds similar, but it changes everything. Because retirement is not something you purchase with a giant lump sum and then stare at. Retirement is a cash flow problem. The real issue is how much money needs to come in each month to support the life you want to live. And that number is often very different from the one people imagine. Your portfolio matters, of course, but only because it helps create income. A 7-figure balance can still feel tight if your lifestyle is expensive and your fixed costs are high. On the other hand, a much smaller portfolio can work surprisingly well if your spending is lower and other pieces of the plan are doing their job. That's why the real answer is usually lower than people think, but only if certain conditions are true. And the next part is where that starts to become clear, because what most retirees actually live on is very different from the fantasy version of retirement people carry in their heads. Section 3. What most retirees actually live on. What most retirees actually live on is usually much lower than the number people picture when they think about comfortable retirement. A lot of working-age people imagine retirement income needs to look almost exactly like their working income, just without the job. But for many households, that is not what happens. Retirement spending often comes down, sometimes by a lot. Part of that is simple. Work-related costs disappear. You are not commuting every day, buying lunch out as often, keeping up the same wardrobe, or funding the version of life that exists around a full-time job. In many cases, payroll taxes go away, savings contributions slow down or stop, and even day-to-day spending becomes more intentional. Some expenses also shrink naturally over time. Kids are usually no longer on the payroll. Mortgages may be lower or gone. The shape of life changes, and the spending often changes with it. That is why lower retirement income does not automatically mean struggle. In a lot of cases, it simply reflects a different kind of life, one that costs less to run than the working years did. But that does not mean the same income works for everyone, and this is where the real answer starts to separate. Because the reason one retiree feels secure on a modest amount, while another feels squeezed on much more, usually comes down to one major factor. Section 4. Why that number feels fine for some people and terrible for others. The real hinge is housing. Two retirees can bring in the exact same monthly income and have completely different experiences, simply because their housing situation is different. One person has a paid-off home, manageable taxes, and low fixed costs. The other is still carrying a mortgage, high rent, or expensive upkeep. On paper, they have the same income. In real life, they are living in different worlds. That is why enough is never just about the number coming in. It is about what the number has to carry. If a big chunk of your retirement income is already spoken for by rent, debt payments, property taxes, insurance, or other fixed obligations, then even a decent income can feel tight. But if those costs are low and your major bills are under control, the same retirement income can feel surprisingly comfortable. This is the part people miss when they compare retirement numbers. They focus on the size of the portfolio or the size of the monthly income, but the real experience of retirement is shaped by the structure of your expenses, and nothing shapes that structure more than housing. Section 5. The 3 hidden supports most people forget to count. The reason the real retirement number can be lower than people expect is that most retirees are not relying on one source alone. The first hidden support is Social Security. For many households, that is the foundation. It may not cover everything, but it reduces how much your portfolio has to do on its own, and that changes the math more than people realize. The second is a paid-off home, or at least a low housing burden. When your biggest monthly expense is reduced, the income you already have stretches much further. That is why 2 people with the same retirement income can feel so different about their situation. The third is that retirement often costs less to run than peak working life. Commuting, saving for retirement itself, work-related spending, and some family expenses often fall away. So the target income does not always need to replace your old paycheck dollar for dollar. Put those 3 supports together, and you can see why the actual number many retirees live on is lower than expected, without that being reckless. It is not magic. It is just that the whole retirement picture usually has more support built into it than people count at first. Section 6. Why so many people still oversave or underspend. Even with all of that, a lot of people still get retirement wrong, because fear fills in the gaps where clarity should be. If you do not know your real number, it is easy to keep chasing a target that was never clearly defined in the first place. You just keep saving because more feels safer, even if you are giving up years of health, time, or flexibility to do it. That fear can push people into 2 opposite mistakes. Some oversave during years when they could have eased up, worked less, or enjoyed more of their life while they still had the energy for it. Others finally retire, but then underspend because they are so afraid of running out that they never let the money do what it was built to do. On paper they are fine, but emotionally, they still live like the plan is one bad month away from collapsing. And that is why knowing your real retirement number matters. It is not just about building confidence before retirement. It is about giving yourself permission to use the plan correctly once you get there. Section 7. The real goal is not a giant number, it's a plan that fits. The real goal is not to hit a giant number just because it sounds impressive. The real goal is to build a plan that fits your life. A plan where your assets, your income sources, and your spending all line up in a way that feels sustainable. That is what retirement security actually is. Not winning a comparison game, but knowing your plan works for the life you want to live. And that takes clarity more than it takes a flashy target, because comparison will push you toward numbers that may have nothing to do with your real needs. Clarity pulls you back to the question that matters, which is whether your plan can support your version of retirement without constant stress. If this is changing how you think about retirement, hit like and subscribe. Most people retire on much less than the cultural fantasy number, but that only works when the rest of the picture is aligned. The portfolio matters, but it is not the whole plan. What really determines whether retirement feels comfortable is how your spending, housing, and income sources fit together. That is the core truth. The number alone is never the full story. A bigger portfolio can still feel tight if the expenses are heavy, and a smaller one can work surprisingly well if the structure underneath it is strong. That is why retirement planning is less about chasing a giant round number and more about understanding what your life actually needs. If this helped you think about retirement more clearly, hit like and subscribe. And I want to hear from you in the comments. What do you think matters more in retirement? The size of the portfolio, or the size of your monthly spending? Also, watch the next video. How much do you actually need to retire comfortably? Because that is where we'll turn this from a big picture idea into a number that actually fits your life.